minds that going on. So today's drop-in is all regarding travel. So our new travel officer in the sustainability group, Beth, will be kind of doing a small slide presentation. Then we've got an opportunity thereafter to do a Q&A session. You may also have had some emails from Caroline, who is currently replacing Joe, who's off on maternity at the moment, introducing potentially some new sustainability champions to yourselves. We are also in the process of coming out to all the champions shortly with one-to-one bookings and group bookings. So please watch out for that. We appreciate your time this morning, this afternoon, to come and have a listen to what Beth has to say about travel, and thank you for attending last week as well. So if I hand over to you, Beth, if that's all right.
Yeah, hello everyone. Can you see that screen? Yeah, brilliant. Okay, great. Yeah, so this drop-in session is focused on travel. So I just put together a couple of slides, as Luke said, just to give you a bit of an overview of what I do, what we're currently doing in the sustainability team. And then really I've tried to keep it as short as possible and dedicate most of the session to people asking me questions, or maybe ask questions if they're sort of wider than just travel, and sort of see what we can come up with if anyone's got any ideas, etc. Sort of now's the time to put those forward. So just to take you through the slides first. So who am I? Well, my name's Beth. Hello everyone. I might have met some of you last week very briefly at the quarterly update, and hi again if I did. But I'm the Sustainable Travel Officer within the sustainability team. My role, I've been in this role for 4 months or so now, so I'm pretty new. But my background is in development planning and transport planning. So sorry. Yeah, development planning and transport planning for large scale infrastructure projects. So I've got quite a lot of experience in transport planning and travel planning for kind of similar scale sites, I guess, such as this. So what are my responsibilities in this role? Well, I guess my main aim is to ensure that the university supports and encourages sustainable travel wherever that's possible for people. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm the car police by any means. It's really to ensure that the university is putting in place the correct level of transport provision by all modes to allow people to have more options to best suit their own needs. And it's also to make sure that transport is as fair and inclusive as possible. The travel plan bit is really the document that underpins my job, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Obviously, travel is not just about our campuses themselves. We're heavily reliant on the resilience of the wider transport network to ensure that anything the university does is effective once people move on and off the site. So we work very, very closely with local authorities, Reading, Woking, Buckinghamshire, and also the likes of Reading Buses, Great Western Rail, cycle companies, etc., etc. So we, really are kind of part of a wider community and wider team. And who is my role for? Well, it's for pretty much all travel associated with the university, our 3 kind of UK campuses, I guess. So that includes all staff and students commuting to and from work or for study. Also includes business travel undertaken by individuals at the university for research, education, and for other purposes. It includes our fleet and operations, maintenance, security, that sort of thing, as well as visitors and deliveries, which also includes event attendees, prospective returning students. So really it's all encompassing. Okay, so moving on. I wanted to give you very brief context on kind of why supporting sustainable travel is so important. In relation to emissions, transport produced 24% of the UK's total greenhouse gases, gas emissions in 2020. And it remains the largest emitting sector in the UK, and the majority of emissions from domestic transport are from road vehicles. The university obviously is committed to achieving net zero by 2030, and we've already achieved a big reduction in carbon emissions, but we still have a long way to go. One other thing that I wanted to note is obviously each local authority has their own vision as part of their local plans, local transport plans for transport and the future of transport, and sustainable travel. Both Reading and Wokingham declared a climate emergency in 2019, and that includes sort of action plans to reduce emissions. So, for example, Wokingham's last progress report in September 2023 details transport as the first of 10 priorities, and they've targeted a 50% reduction in internal combustion engine private car mileage by 2030. So, whilst we're not responsible for local authorities, for example, as one of the largest employers and largest education providers in the region, the impact from travel really has an impact on the surrounding towns and communities far beyond our campuses. Therefore, it's vital, obviously, that we work with local authorities to ensure that they're on track and that we are aligned with what they're doing and, wherever possible with one another. And then my last point on this slide is obviously, lastly, the university owns a lot of land across Reading and beyond, Wokingham and beyond. Any planning application that comes forward has its own legal requirements, which are set out in a separate agreement to that of the wider university commitments. So, whilst I'm not directly involved in, for example, Thames Valley Science Park, it's important that we work together, the operational side, sorry, one second, and the planning side, to make sure that sort of everyone's on the same page. Okay. So I guess I wanted to put everything in a university context. Why is sustainable travel so important? And I've just put a few bullet points together, which I'm just going to go through very briefly. But obviously for the university people and the estate itself, vehicle-dominated campus isn't great. It sort of leads to safety issues, security issues, all sorts of things. The look and feel of the campus is directly impacted by the amount of parking, the amount of roads we have. Our estate is valuable, we're right in the centre of Reading, and we could be using our estate better for other things, whether that's open space, landscaping, natural habitats, etc., even sustainable transport modes. And then obviously, pollution on campus contributes to poor health of our community, and also our campus ecosystems. The communities surrounding our campuses, again, very similar, congestion, pollution. We're a significant employer, and we really have a key role to play in our local community, and particularly on our transport networks. One thing that's quite I guess sort of under sort of stated, I guess, is that by people using their car more, it decreases the viability of other transport modes. So for example, buses, and that has a knock-on effect on our community. So that's quite important. And then obviously the university itself is at the forefront of climate change research, and we really need our campus to reflect that, and we must ensure that we lead by example. So that's that. So I guess moving on to kind of day-to-day stuff, really. I mean, really, my job revolves around a document called a travel plan, which is a document that outlines the university's commitments to changing travel behaviour by staff, students and visitors. We've had a travel plan in place since 2000, I believe. The travel plan contains all the measures and initiatives that the university will implement over a 5-year period, and they're constantly monitored and updated. And the last travel plan was till 2023. We had a kind of interim one, and I'm currently in the process of writing the 2024 travel plan, which will then go on to 2029, so it'll be the next 5 years. Generally, travel plan measures and aims follow a sort of hierarchy, much like waste and other functions across the university. In terms of reducing travel, the first step is to try and reduce the need to travel altogether, which also includes reducing travel during peak times where congestion on the network is higher, leading to higher pollution. Second, reducing single occupancy vehicle use wherever possible. But really, that's about increasing the attractiveness of other modes. Again, not being the car police, and making travel as a whole as fair as possible in terms of pricing, availability, flexibility, everything. Third, try to reduce business travel as far as possible, but obviously taking into account that there's a need for some business travel and that this is important for the wider viability of the university. And then alongside this, on the other side, increasing the least polluting modes, which are obviously walking and cycling at the top of the list, and travel by public transport. And where these aren't possible, sort of responsible car use, for example, shared cars, electric vehicles, or other emerging technologies, I'd rather say. So really, it's a combination, and you can probably imagine that it's a pretty hard job, kind of trying to balance all those things and trying to balance the university and what it needs, and its kind of ongoing viability with the day-to-day sustainability goals. So just to outline that, there's lots of challenges, but then also opportunities to go with those. So some of the I've just noted down a couple of kind of key challenges that I get day to day from people. The top one really is not everyone can work in the way that we're wanting them to. Not everyone can work from home. Not everyone can use alternative modes. People have lives outside of work, and they have to travel in a certain way because of that. And that is understood. Part of my job is to understand that. And I also have my own life outside of work. I completely agree. Some people live far and wide. Not everyone is able to travel in sustainable ways, even if they want to. And then also we're bound to, what we can do as a university. We can't always dictate what's done off campus to improve sustainable travel. There are problems with public transport operators, for example, that we can't always solve. So really, the opportunities are increasing the attractiveness of other modes wherever we can, trying to be as flexible as possible, giving people options, working closely with local authorities and transport bodies and trying to influence them. But I think we might talk about some of these in more detail in a minute. So I might come back to that page if people want to. So just moving on, the last two slides really are what have we been doing to date, and then what are we currently doing? So what have we been doing? Well, a lot really. We already do quite a lot in terms of sustainable travel improvements, and much of those go on kind of behind the scenes. But to give you an example of some of the things we've been doing kind of in the last few years since the last travel survey, which I haven't really been involved in because I wasn't here, but there's been pretty significant changes to the way people work. It's not really as a result of what we've been doing, but it's definitely helped people travel in different ways, more sustainably, work from home, reduce the need to travel. So that's all helped. We've had a load of investment in walking, cycling routes. We've got ongoing really great bike hire schemes and bike doctor schemes, which you may have heard about. I think it was September, I might be wrong, they introduced the free, I think it was before that actually, free park and ride service from Mere Oak for all staff and students, which has had actually a really good uptake, particularly in the last few months. Launched a lift share platform. And then the one that people probably will have heard of in this group is the business travel policy, which I think is actually just called travel policy, but it's really about business travel, which was launched in September of last year. And the aim of that is to reduce business travel emissions by 30% by 2026. The last travel survey we did was in 2022, prior to the one that's happening right now. And just to give you a bit of an overview of what the results showed, I can give more detail to people if necessary. We were pretty close to meeting the stretch target of 87% of journeys made by sustainable modes, and that's by a combination of both staff and students, weighted proportion. But the problem was that most students travel sustainably, but actually our staff were kind of lagging behind, so it kind of pushed the weighting up. But we were behind on staff, so we have recognised that. And then, so a lot of the measures that we've been doing since then are to try and improve sustainable travel for staff in particular. And then what next? Well, what we're doing at the moment is, just to give you a bit of a flavour, currently working on a number of projects which I'm sort of picking up from now on and managing. These include cycle security project. We've got a significant budget for improvements to security across campus, as I know there's a big issue with cycle theft, not just on campus, obviously across the UK, but it's important that we ensure the cycle parking is as safe as possible, so as not to discourage uptake, because clearly people won't bother cycling if they think their bike may get stolen. We're also doing some really interesting work with Reading buses at the moment, which is ongoing, to hopefully improve services, because we have had some negative feedback on bus services. You get negative feedback every year, but we really need to be trying to help sort of improve those services. So we're speaking really closely with Reading buses at the moment on that. We're currently working with Co-Wheels to try and install a new car club vehicle at London Road, which, when that happens, will be great. It'll be the first electric car club in Reading, and also hopefully some EV charging there as well. And then we're also looking at a project to install more EV charging across campuses. That's not it. I mean, that's just what we're doing right now. The other thing I'm doing right now, which is ultra important, is the 2024 travel survey. And really the reason that that's so important this year is because I will be using those results to write my next travel plan. So the things that people suggest will directly, impact what I'm writing in my travel plan, and therefore what the priorities for the university are going to be in the next 5 years. So it really, really is important for people to have their say. There will be some wider consultation, but this is the kind of point really for people to say what they want to see improved. And as a result of that survey and the travel plan that I'll be writing, hopefully that list, the sort of 5 items at the top of that list, will be lengthened significantly, and we'll be doing a lot more in the next 5 years to improve sustainable travel. Not forgetting cars. Cars are they're a travel mode and we can't ignore them, of course, but really we're trying to improve other options as far as we can and make those fair for people. So that's sort of it. I wanted to give you a flavour of why I do what I do, which is the context behind it, the university context, and then what we're doing with the travel plan at the moment. I've just done a slide on kind of open discussion, and I've just put a list really of all of the modes and different things that people might want to talk about. And I was sort of thinking that people might have general themes that they might want to open up a discussion around and see if I have any insight or ideas or anything, or whether I can write some ideas down from other people. So I don't know if Luke, you want to help me facilitate that discussion. I'm not sure.
Of course, I'd first like to say thank you, Beth, for sharing all of that and a really good overview of what you've got yourself into, mainly. And so kind of with that kind of essence, there's people all, if you'd like to put your hands up or just kind of ask any questions in the chat or anywhere, how you'd like to go about it, please feel free to do that now. Jackie, if you'd like to. I think you're on mute at the moment, sorry.
Okay, you hopefully can hear me now.
Hello, yes.
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, I had a couple of thoughts following what you're already doing. So there was stuff about like reducing travel and so on. Are you doing anything with HR to kind of promote vacancies more heavily locally? Because obviously they're open to anybody to apply to, but if we attracted more local applicants, then there will be less travel required. I don't know if anyone had ever thought about that, or whether it would even work or be possible. I thought it might be something to consider. I say that as somebody who travels in, so I'm not local.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's not something that I'm aware has previously been looked at. I guess there's, there'd have to be a careful not to sort of limit anyone else, anyone applying. But yeah, I mean, I guess
I mean, I
it could be promoted more locally.
Yeah, that's what I mean. The adverts will
Yeah.
be on jobsday.co.uk and anybody can see them and apply to them. But if we did some kind of promotion to try and attract more local candidates,
yeah,
it's like when you want to attract more females or whatever it is that you sort of aiming to do. I thought it might be something worth considering, because ultimately the further away they come from, the bigger footprint they're likely to have, or the more difficult, complicated journeys they're less likely to use public transport.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. No, it's not something I'm aware of, but I'll have a look into it, definitely. Yep.
And then I wondered whether it might be useful. I know you want to kind of promote the public transport options. For like people like me, it's not really an option. There's no train station where I live. The bus doesn't come to Reading. And so I've bought a hybrid vehicle, but whether it would be useful to provide more information for staff on options for electric vehicles, because it is quite a minefield when you start looking at buying something suitable. That I sort of bought something I like the look of, but I didn't really make a great decision in terms of like comparing how environmentally friendly they were, other than I knew it was a hybrid, so I just bought that one. But so I don't know if that would be useful. And my only other thought was, there aren't many of us here today. In the other sessions you sent the drop-in, you put what the topic was in the invite. The topic wasn't in the invite today, so I only knew what the topic was because I came to the thing last week.
Oh,
so
okay.
might attract more people. That was my thought.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I'll put that in the notes. That's fine, thank you. Yeah, on the EV one, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I'm not. Are EVs the future? I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. You just bought one, so yeah.
That's the thing. As a lot of people are like, I mean, I was a bit nervous about getting a plug-in because I'm just not that confident in the network yet, which is why I went for a like self-charging hybrid. But there's all those different options that.
So I'm a
think about.
fair expert in this area. I do quite a lot of presentations in industry about electric cars, from sort of manufacturing and trying to get manufacturers to use electric vehicles to, fleet organizations, maintenance organizations to upgrade their fleet to electric cars. I'm an electric car owner. I've done, obviously, because I'm an academic in the field as well, I've done return on investment analysis to death, and I've explored the market pretty much every year for about 10 years. So I'm happy to do drop-in lunch and learn sessions on electric cars. I love it. I can definitely talk people to death, to the point where, yeah, they'll be done overloaded with information. But I'm definitely happy to do that at some lunchtime, or use one of these sessions to just, I've got slides coming out of my ears on sort of EV myth busting and things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks, Sam.
Could I just add something in terms of the sort of the HR position, I suppose. So a few years ago, the university had a electric vehicle car leasing scheme, and that was withdrawn. HR are intending to look at that again, sort of when time allows. They have sort of made that commitment, but it's just, other priorities, particularly brand new HR and payroll system coming in, I think this year, means that's not likely to happen for a little while yet. But that's sort of something a little way down the line. Yeah, I mean, I agree it's a minefield, and I think that's a really good offer from Sam. We in Estates have been looking recently at the question of hybrids, and sorry, Jackie, you're really not going to want to hear this, but looking at sort of plug-in versus kind of self-charging, and environmentally, my distinct view is plug-ins are the better way to go. But I do understand, your kind of reservations about, the infrastructure. But ultimately, that is really where the future is, I guess.
Thank you, Dan. Caitlin, I think you've got your hand up.
Hi, it's Caitlin. Sorry.
Caitlin, sorry.
Yeah. So I'm in the global recruitment team, and my colleagues travel internationally. And I know we were talking about business travel and reducing travel and stuff like that. I just wanted to know if there's like any advice on how I can go about helping them look into that. Is it just looking at the travel policy that they've put out, or is there anything else that I can take away to encourage them? Because I'm not the one traveling. They all go into country and they know what they're doing, and they take taxis and take short flights and whatnot. I'm just trying to figure out how I can help them, in that situation.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I guess, the first step is the travel policy, and everyone becoming as familiar as possible with that to understand why we're doing what we're doing, but it might not give the answers as to how. We are doing, and we've just started, and hopefully your colleagues will have received it, I'm not sure who, doing some reporting every quarter on each school and function's own carbon footprint for business travel. So we will have sent that in the last sort of week or so. So I'm not sure who would have received it, but maybe I can check for you. And that kind of gives just an overview of where you're currently at in your school, and then kind of at the bottom, sort of tips for you, which are kind of personal to why, where you're at, I guess, in the year against the target. And then we always invite people, if they want to come and talk to us anymore, sort of help out, give a few more tips. So it might be worth. You said you're in global recruitment, is that it?
Yeah, global recruitment international. So the international side, not the UK side of it. So it's mainly plain travel. Yeah,
I'll have a look and see who we sent that to. And maybe see if they want to talk to us in any more detail. But generally, I mean, I guess the kind of top tips would be you know, if any travel can be combined, obviously great. That, you know, I understand that some travel has to happen, and that's why the business policy isn't a zero number. You know, we understand that some travel has to happen. So yeah, if anything could be combined, great. If trips can be made longer, but, you know, less travel, again, great. If there's any way that trips can be made, you know, by one person doing more work that rather than two doing half the work, again, sort of those sorts of things. I mean, they're fairly obvious, to be honest, but yeah, happy to talk to individuals.
Thanks.
Could I just add a quick comment now, which is just to say that one of the things in the short term that can really help in terms of at least us sort of reporting back to you, sort of business travel carbon emissions, is sort of the quality of the data that we receive. And I think it's something that we've sort of recognised, having just done that first quarter's analysis, that there's probably a lot that could be done quite simply to improve the data, simply by giving a bit of guidance about what's helpful to kind of put into expense claims or aggresso records, because it's quite a sort of a cumbersome task at the moment. And what we're essentially doing is always assuming worst case scenario if we don't know any better. So the better the information on the aggresso records, then the more accurate we can be in sort of presenting back to you.
I think it's also kind of, I know that Beth might not have been included in some of these conversations, but going to Henley Business School, they also do a fair bit of traveling. So I'm going to use just one example, that they recognised themselves that they had an academic who was flying 5 times out to South Africa. They then realised, actually, after a bit of reflection on that, they could fly out, deliver everything they wanted to in a week, and then fly back. It obviously meant a different way of working, a different way of understanding what they needed to deliver. And so that might be potentially just kind of some of that understanding what people are doing and those sorts of things. And I had heard from the meteorology department, as well as kind of flying a certain distance out to a certain country and then utilising public transport, because in some other countries they're a little bit further ahead than we are. So that infrastructure then helps. So yeah, it's a blended mix of how to kind of do that in those kind of spaces. I'm sure, Beth, you may or may not agree with that. And
No, I do. Yeah. So I can't see if there's anyone else because I haven't got there.
So we've got a comment here about I'm here from the UK side. We have a similar issue with.
Oh yeah, that's Edit. She's in the UK recruitment team, so she'll have the same sort of issues, similar issues.
Okay.
Yeah. It's just we travel so much to do our recruitment events. So yeah, and we have some regionally based officers around the UK, so they travel as well, and just thinking about what we can do with them and for them to encourage more sustainable ways. Yeah, I don't have answers. It's just the discussion has been interesting for that. So I think Caitlin and I, every time we get together to talk about sustainability, we go, oh, travel. Oh.
Yeah, maybe it's worth having a more detailed chat with yourselves, because it might be nice to just, even if none of us have solid answers, but just to kind of use each other as a sounding board for some ideas, and maybe we can come up with some solutions between ourselves. Because yeah, I always think it's better to sit around a table with a coffee and have a chat about particular people and issues. So maybe we can set that up.
Yeah, I think we're quite a nuanced team for this, because even the business policy, the business travel policy doesn't think about the sort of work that a lot of the people in Caitlin's team and my team would be doing. So yeah, I think that might be good.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah, the travel policy had to sort of, I guess, cover everyone, but yeah, definitely happy to
I totally understand why it works the way it works.
Yeah,
it's not not here to moan. It's just one of those things where I know as soon as something comes out or an issue comes up, the sort of things that they'd be saying, and yeah.
That's fine. Yeah, no, happy to have it. Happy to pick that up. That's fine.
Any other questions out there? Anybody else want to bring anything to the table? Obviously, as champions, there may be other things unrelated to travel. Please feel free to add those in if you want have something burning question around other stuff as well. Hi, Kariaki.
Hi. Sorry, I need to figure out how to lower the hand. So my question is, so I'm in the process of thinking of a sustainability policy for the law school. My question is, because I listened to the example of the academic having to go 5 times to South Africa, and yes, they could perhaps reorganize what they deliver and just fly out once and then be back. But will there be any criteria for, that's my question, for people wanting to go abroad to conferences? Let's say if it's not within Europe, where they could probably go also by train or more sustainable means. Will there be any criteria on, apart from the allocation of how much we could spend in carbon footprint, will there be any other criteria to decide who goes on what? That's my question. Sorry, it might be basic, but I just need to know.
The only criteria I'm aware of is the 8 hours. If you can get somewhere within 8 hours by public transport, you should be taking that mode rather than flying. I'm not aware of any other criteria at the moment. Someone else might correct me.
I think that's right. Certainly at this stage, the sort of the expectation is that schools and functions will look at how they implement the carbon budgets at a local level. I think in time we can probably look at what can we learn sort of collectively from good practice and different things that have happened in different areas, and hopefully we can kind of help to facilitate those conversations, because I think in time probably some different things will come out, and Luke gave a nice example of sort of sometimes just sort of thinking a little bit differently, but we I guess kind of deliberately haven't tried to be sort of too dictatorial in the way that you must do this, and some schools have taken sort of a very specific view of how they're going to do this and are trying to sort of allocate sort of an individual share of that kind of travel footprint, but it's still really sort of very early days, and this year really was agreed for those budgets to come in as a sort of soft launch to kind of learn from. I think it's fair to say, at this stage at least, and it is sort of still quite early in the year, it looks like most areas are sort of still within the budgets that have been set, or trending to be within the budgets that are set. But what I'm a little bit conscious of in the past is what we've tended to see is quite a spike in travel towards the end of the academic year. So I guess we'll have to see that full year through before we truly know that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I believe that there was a question from 2 academics that I had in a previous meeting, so I'm going to just field for them because Heather Browning isn't here, as well as another. They just had a query around, obviously the baseline was set pre-pandemic, and student numbers were at a certain level. Academics and the university is looking to grow their student cohorts. Is there going to be any growth in carbon for students to attend stuff, or have we set our carbon budgets quite regimentally with that in mind? Sorry if that doesn't. Yeah, that's probably posed to Beth or Dan. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure the answer to that. I didn't set them. I don't know if you know, Dan.
Sorry, Luke. Can you just play that back to me again?
Yeah. So the university is looking to grow its student cohorts. We fixed carbon budgets at the moment for travel.
Yeah.
Does that allow for any growth travel at all?
Okay.
That's probably
yeah.
the simplest way
Okay.
of
Yeah.
saying
No, I
it.
understand. I mean, at end of the day, the environment doesn't care how many students you've got. It's still an impact on the environment, and so I suppose the harsh answer is they are absolute targets, and so whilst the university absolutely has targets for growth, and this is a very live sort of conversation, we need to do that within sort of sustainable means, both financially and environmentally. At the moment, the proposal is that the current 30% cut in carbon emissions progresses to a 50% cut in emissions by 2030, which is obviously a few years off. But we're gonna have to sort of monitor how that works. But I mean, certainly, I know in the meteorology department who are obviously incredibly sort of keen on this agenda. They've done some quite active work to look at better facilitation of kind of hybrid conferencing. So it doesn't necessarily mean everybody needing to always travel to sort of conferences internationally, and I think in time that sort of thing could sort of happen more. But absolutely, we're going to keep traveling as well. At some point, whatever position we end up in, we are going to have to think about what do we do about the rest of our emissions, and that's going to have to be some sort of carbon capture, carbon offsetting. So to a certain extent, that there is going to be a balance to strike between how much do we just cut and how much do we need to offset. Carbon offsetting has a very bad press, and I think quite rightly so. But we do need to recognise for anyone, for any organisation or any nation to reach sort of zero emissions means you've got to be doing something to capture those remaining emissions, which are going to continue. And so in the next few years, we'll really start looking more at, well, what can we do on our own land to increase carbon capture on our own land? So could we plant a woodland? Actually, planting a woodland isn't so academics tell me it's not necessarily the best thing to be doing sort of carbon capture wise. It could just be better management of land, different management of its existing land, but I think increasingly we'll need to look at those sort of other solutions. So it may be in time that we feel that if the carbon budgets that are being set are kind of in conflict with targets around growth, then maybe we need to do more in terms of capturing emissions to sort of offset that. But what we're clear about is that should happen as late as possible. We should do the most we can to reduce our own emissions as much as possible. And if we are going to do any sort of offsetting, that we want it to be as kind of trustworthy as it can be.
Thank you for that. That just clarifies that. At this point, are there any other questions or comments that anyone would like to make? It's obviously an open session for conversations.
I'm happy to take any EV questions now.
I think if everyone is silent, I think we will end it there and give some time back to everyone. I'd just like to say thank you all for coming. You will obviously be hearing from us shortly, and I will send this recording out to everyone in the group and for those that didn't attend also. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.